Let's get real for a second. Breaking up with someone who acts like they never cared should be easier, right? I mean, they were distant. They shut down when things got emotional. They made you feel like you were too much just for needing connection. So why does it feel like your whole body is grieving, like something inside you just died? Because it did. When you love someone who keeps you at arm's length, you're not just breaking up with them, you're breaking up with the hope that one day they'd finally choose you, that one day they'd wake up and give you the kind of love you kept trying to earn. This isn't just heartbreak. This is emotional withdrawal. It's your nervous system crashing from the constant push-pull. And if no one's ever told you this before, hear it now. You are not crazy for feeling this way. Let's talk about why breaking up with an avoidant partner can feel like the end of the world and how you take your power back. When you're in a relationship with someone avoidant, it often doesn't start out feeling cold or disconnected. In fact, it might begin like magic. There's chemistry intensity, maybe even a sense of destiny. They can be incredibly charming, present, and even affectionate in the early stages. This is when they're not yet triggered by closeness. When things are still light, undefined, and emotionally safe for them, that early phase creates what feels like a powerful connection, a spark that pulls you in, and you start to believe that this person truly sees you. But what you're experiencing isn't necessarily true emotional intimacy. It's a surface level connection that mimics depth, an illusion. As time passes, you start to feel the subtle shifts. Maybe they don't text back as quickly. Maybe they dodge serious conversations. Maybe they seem distant after a moment of vulnerability. They withdraw without explanation, go silent when things get real, and leave you wondering what you did wrong. You start to work harder to get back what you felt in the beginning. You become invested in recovering the version of them that showed up early on. This is where the illusion of connection becomes dangerous, because it's not that there was no connection, it's that the connection was never emotionally secure or consistent. You were building something on hope and potential, not on mutual vulnerability and emotional availability, but to your nervous system, to your heart, it felt real. And that's what makes detaching from them so painful. You weren't just in love with the person, you were in love with who they could be, with the connection you thought you had, and with the future you imagined. Avoidant partners often have a deep fear of intimacy. When things start to get emotionally intense or when expectations arise, they tend to shut down, retreat, or push people away. But they don't always do this with harsh words or outright rejection. Sometimes they do it with passivity, silence, or inconsistency. And that creates confusion. You're not being clearly rejected, you're being half chosen. They show up just enough to keep you hanging on, but never fully enough to make you feel safe. That intermittent reinforcement, the hot and cold behavior, is the psychological trap that makes the illusion of connection feel so powerful. And because your heart is wired for connection, your brain starts to work overtime trying to fill in the gaps. You might rationalize their behavior. You might take responsibility for their distance. You might think, if I just love them more, they'll open up. If I'm more patient, they'll stop pulling away. You internalize their avoidant behavior as something you need to fix. But the truth is, their inability to connect deeply isn't about your worth, it's about their fear. Still, knowing that intellectually doesn't make it hurt less, because when you're caught in the illusion of connection, it feels like you almost had something beautiful. And almost love can be more painful than no love at all. It keeps you in limbo, always reaching, always hoping, never fully receiving. It keeps you stuck in a cycle of trying to prove you're enough for someone who can't or won't meet you emotionally. And when that relationship ends, it doesn't just feel like a breakup. It feels like a failure of all the emotional investment you made. You mourn what you thought the relationship could become. You grieve the connection you believed you had. But here's the hard truth. Real connection requires two people who are both willing to show up with open hearts. It's not something you can create on your own. No matter how much you love, give, or sacrifice, you can't force someone to emotionally engage if they're terrified of closeness. And you certainly can't make them feel safe if they haven't done the inner work to feel safe with themselves. The illusion of connection is like a mirage in the desert. You keep walking toward it thinking you're about to quench your thirst, but it keeps disappearing just as you get close. And every time it fades, you blame yourself, when in reality, the connection was never solid to begin with. It was based on potential, not reality. And letting go means facing the pain of that truth. It means acknowledging that what you felt wasn't equally shared. that they may never have been emotionally present, even when you swore they were. But facing that truth is also the first step toward healing. Because when you shatter the illusion, you stop trying to win love from someone who can't give it. You stop making excuses for emotional neglect, and you start reclaiming your right to a connection that's mutual, secure, and real. That illusion might have felt like love, but real love doesn't leave you starving. It doesn't make you feel invisible, too needy, or ashamed for having emotional needs. Breaking up with an avoidant partner feels like death because you're mourning the dream you built around them, the connection you thought was there. But the longer you chase that illusion, the further you get from the real thing, and you deserve the real thing. Being in a relationship with someone emotionally avoidant often means living in a constant state of emotional hunger. You may not realize it at first. In fact, you might start out feeling satisfied, high on the attention, the moments of closeness, the spark. But soon that sense of warmth begins to fade. And what replaces it is a growing, gnawing sense of lack. You begin to crave something you can't quite name, more presence, more affection, more something that always seems just out of reach. And so you keep reaching, keep giving, keep loving, in hopes that what you're missing will eventually be returned. What you don't see right away is that you're emotionally starving. You're trying to stay full on breadcrumbs, sporadic texts, half-hearted affection, vague promises, or occasional moments of intimacy that are never sustained. The avoidant partner often withdraws when emotional needs surface, not out of cruelty, but out of discomfort. Intimacy feels threatening to them. Vulnerability feels unsafe. So instead of leaning in when you reach out, they lean out. Instead of responding with warmth, they freeze. And that creates a cycle. You become the emotional pursuer. They become the distancer. This dynamic leaves you with deep, unmet emotional needs, but it doesn't kill your hope. It intensifies it. Because every now and then, the avoidant partner does show up. They come close just enough to make you think you're making progress. They say something sweet, touch you gently, maybe even open up for a moment, and it feels like oxygen to someone who's been holding their breath. Your whole body lights up thinking, finally, this is it. They see me. And just as quickly, they retreat again. This hot and cold behavior isn't just confusing, it's addictive. It creates a psychological pattern similar to reward-based training. Your brain starts to associate their rare affection with massive emotional payoff. And when that affection goes away, your system goes into panic. You begin chasing that high. It's not just about love anymore, it's about relief. Relief from the ache of not being seen. Relief from the fear of abandonment. Relief from feeling like you're not enough. That chase becomes the focus, and it exhausts you. The emotional starvation isn't only about what you don't get from them, it's about how much you give without receiving. You pour out your care, your empathy, your time, your affection. You make excuses for them, rationalize their distance, convince yourself they're just stressed or tired or not good at expressing emotions. You minimize your own needs to avoid pushing them away further. You learn to suppress the parts of you that are too emotional, too intense, too needy, not realizing that none of those things are flaws. They're human needs, and you've just been taught they're a burden. Over time, this emotional deprivation begins to wear on you, not just mentally, but physically. Your nervous system is in constant fight or flight. You're anxious when they're distant, relieved when they engage, and on edge, waiting for the next time they'll pull away. Your self-esteem takes a hit because you start to equate your worth with their inconsistent affection. You think, if I was more lovable, they'd be more consistent. If I was easier, they wouldn't shut down. And that belief that their avoidance is your fault keeps you stuck. You also start to compare this relationship with what it could be. You hold on to the early days, those rare moments of closeness, and you try to recreate them. You believe if you just do the right thing, say the right words, show enough patience, they'll finally open up. But that fantasy keeps you emotionally imprisoned because the truth is, no amount of your love can heal someone else's fear of intimacy. That work has to be their own. And most of the time, avoidantly attached partners don't even recognize the wound, let alone feel motivated to change it. And the deeper tragedy here is that you've been giving love in its purest form, consistent, patient, hopeful love to someone who can't receive it. So the love doesn't flow back. It hits a wall and then turns inward. You begin blaming yourself. That internalization is what deepens the emotional hunger. It's no longer just about missing them. It's about feeling completely alone while standing right next to someone you care about. It's about the heartbreak of being emotionally invisible to the person who matters most to you. Eventually, the starvation becomes too heavy to carry. The moments of connection no longer outweigh the emptiness. And when the relationship ends, it feels like collapse, not just of the bond, but of your own emotional foundation. You've been so hungry for so long, you forget what it feels like to be full. And that emptiness post-breakup can feel like death. But what's dying isn't just the relationship, it's the version of you that believed you had to earn love through suffering. Recovery begins when you recognize the hunger for what it is, a sign that your needs are valid, that your desire for closeness, consistency, and emotional presence is not a flaw. It's a sign of a healthy, loving human being. And as painful as it is, walking away from someone who keeps you starving is the first step toward feeding your soul with real mutual connection. You deserve more than crumbs. You deserve a love that fills you, not one that leaves you begging. One of the most confusing and painful aspects of being in a relationship with someone emotionally avoidant is the sense of being stuck in something that clearly hurts you, but still feels impossible to leave. You know the relationship isn't giving you what you need. You feel the loneliness, the inconsistency, the constant anxiety, and yet walking away feels like tearing your own heart out. That's not just emotional dependence or being too sensitive. That's the grip of a trauma bond. A trauma bond is a powerful psychological connection formed through cycles of emotional pain and intermittent reinforcement. When you're with an avoidant partner, your nervous system goes on a roller coaster. You experience periods of distance and emotional starvation, followed by rare, fleeting moments of affection, apology, or connection. These emotional highs and lows create a chemical pattern in your brain, not unlike addiction. You're not just attached to the person, you're attached to the unpredictable reward system they've unconsciously created. This cycle creates an intense focus on the good moments. You start to idealize them, replay them, hold on to them like lifelines. You think, see, they can be loving. They do care. And that glimmer of hope keeps you hanging on despite all the pain in between. You start to confuse emotional intensity with love, and the rare moments of validation begin to feel like proof that the connection is real, even if it's unhealthy most of the time. The trauma bond forms because your brain is trying to make sense of inconsistency. You are wired to seek connection, especially with people you care about. When that connection is offered and then withdrawn repeatedly, it doesn't make you give up. It makes you try harder. You become more attentive, more forgiving, more invested. The emotional deprivation amplifies your desire, and the momentary affection becomes a kind of reward your system is desperately trying to earn again. This is where the pain deepens. You start to internalize the dysfunction. You blame yourself for the distance. You think if you just did something differently, if you were less emotional, more understanding, more patient, they wouldn't pull away. Instead of seeing their avoidant behavior as a reflection of their own emotional limitations, you start to see it as a reflection of your inadequacy. That belief ties you even tighter to the bond because now your self-worth is on the line. Leaving isn't just losing the relationship. It feels like giving up on proving your value. What makes trauma bonds so dangerous is that they don't operate on logic. You can know that the relationship is toxic, one-sided, or painful, and still feel unable to let go. That's because trauma bonding hijacks your survival instincts. Your brain begins to equate this person with both pain and relief, fear and comfort. It's the emotional version of a slot machine, unpredictable, but addictively rewarding when you win. And because those wins are rare, they feel monumental. You tell yourself they're just scared. They need time. I see their potential. And you wait, often for months or years, for them to become who you know they could be. But here's the truth. Trauma bonding isn't love. It's attachment formed in the presence of emotional inconsistency and fear. Real love doesn't require you to earn safety or prove your worth. It doesn't keep you questioning your place in someone's life. Real love shows up consistently, honestly, vulnerably. Trauma bonding, on the other hand, keeps you locked in a loop where your nervous system is constantly on edge. Your self-esteem slowly erodes and your emotional needs are routinely invalidated. Sometimes, people stay in trauma-bonded relationships because they've learned, often from childhood, that love comes with pain. That affection is something you work for, not something you receive freely. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, unpredictable, or absent, then an avoidant partner's behavior might actually feel familiar. Not healthy, but familiar. And your brain confuses that familiarity with safety. That's not your fault. It's your nervous system doing what it was trained to do. But once you become aware of it, you have a choice to start breaking that pattern. The process of breaking a trauma bond is excruciating at first. It feels like withdrawal. Your body aches. Your mind obsesses. You feel lost without the person who gave you the highest highs and the lowest lows. But what you're withdrawing from is not just them, it's the chemical cycle of hope, disappointment, and survival. It's the rush of trying to be enough for someone who made you feel like too much. And as hard as it is, moving through that pain is the only way to reach emotional freedom. Healing starts with recognizing that the love you were fighting for was never sustainable because it was built on anxiety, not trust. The more you return to your own emotional truth, that your needs are not too much, that consistency is not a luxury, that you deserve to be seen and chosen fully, the more the trauma bond begins to loosen its grip. And eventually, the thing that once felt like love starts to feel like what it really was, a survival pattern disguised as a relationship. Letting go of a trauma bond is not weakness. It's reclaiming your power. It's choosing yourself after being emotionally trained to settle for less. And even though it may hurt like hell in the moment, it's also the beginning of a life where you're no longer begging for love. You're receiving it fully and freely. One of the hardest parts of breaking up with someone who is emotionally avoidant is that you rarely get the closure you crave. Closure is often thought of as a clean ending, an honest conversation, clear explanations, mutual understanding, and some sense of finality. But with avoidant partners, closure is often elusive or entirely absent. Instead, you're left with unanswered questions, confusing mixed signals, and a swirling fog of what-ifs that keep you emotionally entangled long after the relationship ends. This lack of closure happens for several reasons. First, avoidant individuals tend to avoid emotional confrontation. When feelings get intense or difficult, their instinct is to pull away rather than lean in. They may disappear without explanation or offer vague, non-committal responses that feel like doors left ajar. This behavior can leave you stuck in a limbo, trying to piece together why the relationship ended or what you could have done differently, but never getting a clear answer. They might also minimize or dismiss your feelings. Avoidants often have a hard time recognizing and validating emotional experiences, not only their own, but others as well. When you try to express your pain, confusion, or desire for clarity, they may respond with detachment, defensiveness, or silence. This invalidation deepens the wound because it feels like your pain doesn't matter, or worse, that you're overreacting. Without acknowledgement, your emotional experience feels invisible, and the natural process of healing gets stuck. Closure also requires a sense of mutual participation, a two-way exchange where both people can process and say goodbye, but avoidants tend to emotionally disengage long before the relationship officially ends. They often start retreating, shutting down, or disappearing emotionally, so by the time you break up, they may already be halfway out the door mentally and emotionally. This half-presence creates confusion and mixed signals. You might feel like you're breaking up with someone who's never fully been there in the first place. That absence makes it hard to find any real sense of ending, because part of you wonders if the relationship was real or if it was all in your head. The absence of closure can fuel obsessive thinking and emotional rumination. Your mind replays conversations, texts, and moments over and over, trying to decode hidden meanings or find explanations. You might replay that last interaction hundreds of times, dissecting every word, tone, and gesture. You look for signs that they cared or hints that they still want you back. This mental loop keeps you tethered to the relationship emotionally, making it difficult to move forward. Because closure doesn't come from them, you often find yourself searching for it elsewhere. You might look for validation from friends, family, or even strangers online, anywhere that might offer answers or confirm that your feelings are real and justified. But while external support can help, true closure is internal. It's about coming to terms with the reality of what happened, accepting the limits of what you can control, and giving yourself permission to let go, even if you never get the answers you want. Another reason closure is so difficult with avoidance is that they often leave the relationship open-ended. They avoid finality because endings trigger fear, fear of loss, fear of vulnerability, fear of fully confronting the emotional reality. Sometimes they'll say things like, Maybe we need time apart, or let's see what happens, without clear boundaries or timelines. This kind of ambiguity leaves the door open just enough to keep you hoping. And hope, while powerful, can keep you stuck in emotional limbo. This lack of closure isn't just frustrating, it can feel like an emotional trap. Without clear endings, your brain struggles to switch off the attachment. The uncertainty activates the same stress response as physical danger. Your nervous system stays on high alert, searching for safety and reassurance. It's exhausting, and it prolongs the grief and heartbreak. Finding closure in this context requires a shift in perspective. Instead of waiting for them to give it to you, which may never happen, you have to create it yourself. That means acknowledging the relationship for what it was without the hope that it will become something different. It means accepting that you may never get the full explanation or the apology you wanted. It means making peace with the fact that their emotional avoidance was about their own fears and limitations, not about your worth. Creating your own closure also means setting clear boundaries. You might need to cut off contact, at least temporarily, to stop the cycle of mixed signals and emotional back and forth. Silence, as hard as it is, can be a powerful tool for healing because it allows your nervous system to calm down and your mind to stop spinning. It gives you the space to grieve without interruption and to rebuild your sense of self outside the relationship. Ultimately, closure isn't about making sense of everything or rewriting the past. It's about reclaiming your power over your own emotional narrative. It's about choosing to release the relationship with all its pain and confusion so you can step into a future where you are free to love and be loved fully and authentically. Closure comes not from them, but from you. From the moment you decide that your peace and healing matter more than unanswered questions, and that decision is the beginning of your freedom. When a relationship with an avoidant partner ends, the grief that follows can feel unlike any other kind of loss. It's not just the loss of a person or a partnership, it's the loss of something that never fully existed in the way you needed it to. This grief is complicated because you're mourning not just the reality of the relationship, but the dream you built around it, the hope, the potential, the possibility of what could have been if only things were different. It feels like a kind of emotional death because you're saying goodbye not only to someone you loved, but to the version of love you imagined. The pain feels raw and confusing because avoidant relationships often lack the markers of traditional connection that help us process loss. There might not have been many moments of consistent closeness, open communication, or emotional safety. Instead, the relationship was marked by distance, silence, and emotional unavailability. That means you don't just grieve the person, you grieve the absence of the connection itself. You grieve what should have been there but never was. This kind of grief can feel isolating because it's invisible to others. Friends and family may not understand why you're so devastated by someone who didn't really care or was never fully present. They might tell you to move on, to stop dwelling on someone who hurt you, or to get over it quickly. But the truth is, your pain is valid because you were deeply invested. Your heart was open, and you gave your love and attention even when the other person couldn't or wouldn't fully return it. That level of emotional investment creates a wound that can feel like it's cutting to the core of your identity. The grief also involves a profound sense of abandonment, not just by the avoidant partner, but sometimes by your own sense of safety and trust. You trusted that this person would meet you, that they would show up for you emotionally, that they would be someone you could depend on. When they didn't, that trust shattered. And rebuilding that trust, both in others and in yourself, becomes a crucial part of healing. Because the avoidant partner was often emotionally distant or unpredictable, the breakup can leave you stuck in a kind of liminal space, caught between holding on to the relationship and needing to let it go. You might find yourself going over every detail, every conversation, every moment where you thought things were changing, hoping to find meaning or clues that explain what went wrong. This mental replay keeps the grief alive and prevents you from moving forward. It's a natural response to loss, but it can keep you trapped in the past longer than you want. Another layer of this grief is the loss of hope. When you're with someone avoidant, you often cling to the hope that they will change, that they will open up, that one day the relationship will be different. That hope becomes part of your identity and your emotional survival strategy. When the relationship ends, it's not just the person you lose, it's the future you imagined with them. That future disappears suddenly, and the void it leaves behind can feel overwhelming. This grief can also bring up feelings of shame and self-doubt. You might wonder why you stayed as long as you did. You might question your judgment or feel embarrassed for loving someone who wasn't fully capable of loving you back. These feelings are normal, but they're also deeply unfair. Loving someone who is emotionally unavailable is not a sign of weakness or poor judgment. It's a sign of your capacity to love and hope, even in difficult circumstances. Healing from this kind of grief is a process of reclaiming your sense of self and your emotional autonomy. It means learning to sit with the pain without letting it define you. It means recognizing that your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to love you. It means forgiving yourself for any perceived mistakes and allowing yourself to grieve fully and authentically. Part of healing also involves relearning what healthy connection looks like. After experiencing the unpredictability and emotional distance of an avoidant relationship, you may find it hard to trust your feelings or to believe that true intimacy is possible. You might build walls to protect yourself from future hurt. But slowly, as you heal, you begin to understand that connection can be consistent, mutual, and nurturing. You start to open your heart again, this time with greater wisdom and boundary. The grief of losing an avoidant partner is like mourning a ghost, something that was there and not there at the same time. It's a unique form of loss that requires time, patience, and compassion to work through. And while the pain may feel unbearable in the moment, it's important to remember that this grief is a sign of your humanity. It's proof that you dared to love, to hope, and to reach for something real, even when the odds were stacked against you. Eventually, with healing, the grief transforms. It becomes less about loss and more about growth. You begin to see the relationship not just as a source of pain, but as a teacher that showed you what you truly deserve. You emerge stronger, more self-aware, and ready to create connections that honor your worth. And in that transformation, the death you once felt becomes a powerful rebirth. After a breakup with an avoidant partner, one of the most vital steps toward healing is learning how to rebuild and reconnect with yourself on a deep, authentic level. When you've been in a relationship where your emotional needs were consistently ignored or dismissed, your sense of self can become fragmented, confused, or even lost. You may have spent so much time adjusting to their avoidance, minimizing your feelings, hiding your needs, and tiptoeing around emotional landmines that you no longer fully recognize who you are outside of that dynamic. Rebuilding your sense of self is essential not only for healing, but also for creating healthy, fulfilling relationships in the future. At the core of this process is reclaiming your emotional autonomy. Emotional autonomy means trusting your own feelings, honoring your needs, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable without fear of rejection or judgment. When you've been with an avoidant partner, this can feel unfamiliar or even unsafe. You might have learned to suppress your emotions because expressing them was met with distance, criticism, or silence. You may have doubted your feelings or convinced yourself that needing closeness or reassurance was too much. Healing begins by giving yourself permission to feel fully and openly again. Whether that means sadness, anger, longing, or joy, and understanding that your emotions are valid and important. Reconnecting with yourself also means rebuilding your identity outside of the relationship. During an avoidant partnership, it's common to lose touch with your own passions, interests, and values as you prioritize managing the relationship's emotional challenges. You might have changed parts of yourself to accommodate their fears, hiding your true thoughts or desires to keep the peace. Recovery involves rediscovering what makes you uniquely you, your dreams, your boundaries, your sense of purpose. This process can be both exciting and intimidating because it requires stepping into a space that might feel unfamiliar or vulnerable, but it also offers a powerful opportunity to nurture self-love and confidence. Another important part of rebuilding is learning to trust your intuition and judgment again. Being with an avoidant partner often distorts your sense of reality because you're constantly second-guessing yourself. Was I too needy? Did I push too hard? Am I overreacting? This self-doubt can linger long after the breakup, making it hard to trust your feelings or decisions. Healing requires you to reconnect with your inner voice, the part of you that knows what's right and safe. This means listening to your gut feelings, honoring your limits, and practicing self-compassion when you stumble. Over time, rebuilding this trust helps you create stronger, healthier boundaries and relationships. Healing also involves nurturing your nervous system back to balance. The stress of an avoidant relationship marked by unpredictability, rejection, and emotional withdrawal can keep your nervous system stuck in a state of hypervigilance or shutdown. This chronic stress can affect your mental and physical health, leaving you exhausted, anxious, or disconnected. Practices like mindfulness, grounding techniques, Movement and deep breathing can help soothe your nervous system, bringing you back to a place of calm and safety. This isn't just about relaxation, it's about retraining your body and mind to recognize when you're safe enough to connect to yourself and to others. Rebuilding also means embracing self-care in its fullest sense, not just treating yourself to nice things, but truly honoring your emotional, physical, and mental well-being. This can look different for everyone. For some, it might mean setting firm boundaries with people who don't support your healing. For others, it might mean seeking therapy, joining support groups, or developing creative outlets that help you process your feelings. The key is to prioritize yourself in a way that feels nourishing and empowering, not guilty or selfish. When you care for yourself deeply, you send a message to your subconscious that you are worthy of love and respect. Part of this journey includes learning to cultivate self-compassion. After experiencing emotional neglect or invalidation, it's common to internalize harsh judgments and blame. You might replay mistakes, magnify flaws, or feel ashamed for needing what everyone needs. Connection, love, and understanding. Healing requires you to treat yourself with the same kindness and patience you would offer a dear friend. This means forgiving yourself for past choices, recognizing your inherent worth, and reminding yourself that your feelings matter. Self-compassion softens the inner critic and builds resilience. As you rebuild your sense of self, you also start to redefine what healthy relationships look like for you. You develop clarity about your values, your deal breakers, and what kind of partnership will truly support your growth and happiness. This new clarity is a powerful shield against falling back into patterns that don't serve you. You begin to attract or create relationships where emotional availability, respect, and mutual care are the foundation, relationships that nourish rather than deplete you. Finally, reconnecting with yourself after an avoidant breakup opens the door to a deeper, more authentic form of love. When you've healed your wounds and rebuilt your emotional foundation, you're no longer chasing love to fill a void or prove your worth. Instead, you're able to love from a place of wholeness and presence. This shift changes everything, not just how you relate to others, but how you relate to yourself. You become your own safe haven, your own best advocate, and your own greatest source of comfort. Rebuilding after an avoidant relationship isn't easy, and it takes time, but with patience, self-awareness, and commitment, you can emerge stronger and more centered than ever before. The journey back to yourself is not just a recovery, it's a transformation. It's a reclamation of your power to choose love that feels good, to honor your needs without apology, and to live a life rich with connection, authenticity, and joy. Breaking up with an avoidant partner is one of the most painful and confusing experiences you can face. It feels like losing not just a person, but the very hope of connection and love you longed for. Yet within that deep pain lies an opportunity, a chance to reclaim your worth, to break free from patterns that no longer serve you, and to rebuild a life centered on your own emotional truth. Healing from this kind of loss is not about forgetting or denying the hurt. It's about embracing your strength to move forward, to create boundaries, and to open your heart to love that is consistent, real, and fully reciprocal. Remember, the end of this relationship is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter where you choose yourself, honor your needs, and step into the freedom to love and be loved the way you deserve.